Hello, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today for our webinar. Today we are going to gather together today and talk about the power of two-way messaging in pharma. We're going to look at this from the perspectives of tech as well as sales and strategy, and just take a couple different perspectives of why two-way messaging is so important. Today with us we have Kimberly Gregorio, who is going to be representing our sales side of the story. She's actually the VP of Account Management and the ZING brand lead. So she's going to wear that hat as a former sales rep for Pharma. We also have Darran White with us today. He's going to be taking that lead of the sales ops piece of that puzzle. And then we have David Vasquez, and he's going to take on the IT infrastructure representative piece of this, as that's what his background is in. So let's just go ahead and dive in and get started. First question I want to kind of throw out to the group right now, maybe KG, start with you. Why do you think, as a sales professional, that text messaging is so important with that communication?
Sure. Thank you, Kate. For me, if I put my old sales rep hat on, I would say in this ever-changing world of technology, there's so much flying at my customers, right, at the HCPs. And being able to meet them in a channel that they're using regularly is super important. Right now, all I can do to send them branded content is through email or deliver it to them in person. And there's access changes. Email's not going read, but being able to message them would be really important for me, because I already am able to message them to say, hey, can I stop by tomorrow? How's the weather? That kind of thing. But then they sometimes have a question and I have to say, wait, I got to email you. And so being able to respond right back to them with the answer to that question is really important for me, because making it easy for my customers to understand my product is important.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Darran, how do you feel from like a sales op perspective? Do you align with that or have a different take on it?
No, I 100% align with that. And I've always viewed sales operations role in a commercial organization is to enable that organization to do everything they can to kind of deliver on their job, which is to sell the product and promote it. And channels such as messaging is absolutely right in the heart of that. So enabling these channels in ways that can be used in more kind of useful approaches, like being able to send content like KG had mentioned, or being able to kind of use it beyond just the simple, hi, great seeing you yesterday, kind of thing. This is right at the heart of what sales operations should do and commonly does. So this is important. And it's important to be done right as well, which is a big lift for sales operations to make sure that the things they choose fit the need as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, that's a great segue to talk about the IT piece of that, because what are like the key factors that the technology department needs to consider when their request is made to incorporate something like messaging into the organization's, HCP or patient communication strategy? Like, what do you think about that, David?
Yeah, so, for years, I know that pharma companies have always been looking for better ways to engage with healthcare professionals. And my role in IT was to facilitate that and to deploy those systems. If I were asked, that they wanted to deploy a texting or messaging solution, I would pretty much kick into like a discovery mode. My very first question would be, are you doing it today? Right? So everybody's got an app, everybody's got a text device. So my question is, am I solving a problem, meaning there's text messaging happening today that's unchecked, or are we actually deploying a new channel? I recently had a conversation with a company and I had asked that question, what are you doing today? And the answer from that company was, well, we do allow our reps to text on their devices. And if there is a problem, because I said, well, what if there's a problem, some non-compliant messaging or something? They said it's the responsibility of the rep. So the rep holds a responsibility of that error. Now, ironically, in that same conversation, they had mentioned that promotional materials weren't allowed to be sent. So, my question there was, how do you know if promotional materials are being sent or not? If the rep is just messaging them without any controls. Now, look, I'm not a lawyer, but I would venture to guess that the company holds a significant amount of responsibility as to what's being said or sent on behalf of that company and the product. So that would be my first thing. Again, I just want to see if I'm solving a problem, maybe messages are being sent and they're not auditable, or is this truly a new channel? And then you've got all the other components of it, like how is it a part of your sales cycle? Are text messages considered calls? How do you integrate, right? I'm assuming companies don't want HCP contact information on their device solely. How do you audit information? What if there's a legal hold, right? So in my IT experience, trust me, I've seen plenty of dead cell phones in a corner because they were quote on legal hold because the rep had left. And the answer I've always gotten from lawyers when we've done our research is it's the data that's important, not so much the device. So for me, a product like ZING allows me to separate, to some extent, the data from the device itself while you're keeping controls of all those messages.
Interesting. Focusing really on that data piece of it. That's a good piece of that. KG, back to you. What as your experience as a sales rep, what are some real world communication challenges that you think that sales teams face with HCPs specifically?
Yeah. And before I answer that question, I wanted to go back and touch on something that David had mentioned, right? As a rep, hearing it falls on me as my responsibility would be terrifying. And so that's why I think products like ZING that can capture this and help protect me are so important, right? And as new litigations coming out from the DOJ and different places saying you need to start tracking this, and we're seeing it more in the financial industry, and as we all know what happens there, it comes to life sciences. That's important. And from a rep, that's a lot to ask of them to say, you got to know and don't make any mistakes because it's on you. The company would definitely have to bear some burden on that. And so ZING can protect everybody in that perspective. So I'm glad you mentioned that, David, because that's a really important point. But back to your question, Kate. So what would be most important for me, right, as a sales rep? How would it help me in my real world communications? I think I kind of touched on this before, but access is hard. The HCPs are busy. They have information overload. There's many, many reps trying to feed so much information to them. And being able to keep a conversational channel, almost a on-call kind of addition to my bag of communication tools with my HCPs would be great, right? Yes, I can send them the rep triggered email. Yes, I can go into a full detail. We can have conferences, we can have dinners, but this allows me to say, hey, Dr. Kate, how's the weather today? Everything going well? Do you need anything? And them to say, you know what? I'm seeing a patient today, and I really think your product is on, what be great for them. But I can't remember. What did you say about how to dose it? I'm making this up, right? I could quickly say, here's that dosing card and send it to them. I don't have to be in front of them. I don't have to be coming to them later to deliver that information. I can give it to them right then, right there when they need it. And I feel that's something that the HCPs I've discussed this with need. They need to have that for them. So I think it would just be helpful to be able to not change channels, be able to have all of that information there, but also service my customers when they need it, right? So I don't have to even be in the same zip code as that customer, but I've now given them the information they need to better help their patients, and it helps service their needs from me.
That makes complete sense. Being able to access the information for them on demand, I think, is such a huge game changer. And that's really, really key when you're dealing with next level of communication.
Right. And they use that messaging platform already regularly, right? So it's so easy for them to be able to just use the same platform they're currently using to talk to me, so that they can know, hey, oh, right, I can just email KG real quick and say, or text KG real quick and say, hey, I need this, and I can get it right away. Right. So just keeping that fluency for them is important.
Yeah, exactly. And it creates a lot less friction there, so that communication channel is just so open and ready. So yeah, those are great points. Darren, what about you? How do sales operations leaders view two-way messaging in the context of compliance, system level efficiency, and scale? What do you think about that?
Yeah, KG touched on a number of these points, right? The DOJ comes out, continuously with updates on guidance about ephemeral messaging platforms, and we see the kind of ramifications of those that don't fall into those guidelines. I'm not going to say daily, but frequently enough, right? This is an important thing to be considering. And, the way I look at the compliance piece for messaging, we did this a while ago. We did this with email, because this is the same kind of challenges that were faced with us in email a decade or so ago. And we worked through it, right? We found ways to be compliant. We found ways to restrict the content that could be shared. We found ways to monitor the words that were being sent to make sure that there's no kind of egregious offenses there. There's ways for us to report on it and things like that. We did all those tools. We kind of baked all those tools out for email, and that kind of has become acceptable at this point. And, doing those same things for messaging is essentially all we're doing here today, right? It's still a channel. It's an accepted channel. It's digital. You can still bake those kind of safety features in, and you need to, especially like I'd mentioned with the DOJ guidance coming out, saying, giving the guidance that they need, and then seeing those ramifications of it. So from a compliance piece, it's imperative that we have these tools in place. I think both KG and David mentioned that just sending messages is something that might be allowed by the company, but how do you know that's all, right? That's a big risk. How they parse that risk out is up to each company, but that is still a risk. From the scale and system level efficiency piece that you'd mentioned, to me, again, sales ops job is to enable the commercial org to do their job, which is to go out, promote the product, sell the product. The best way that you can do that is to give them resources that are easy to access, and baking as many of those resources into one kind of place is incredibly valuable. I've always, every time I've deployed something or considered deploying something out to the team, I count a WIFM score, kind of, or what's in it for me for every user. And in this case, we're kind of talking about sales reps. The sales rep has to have a what's in it for me score that's above the barrier to entry, right? And if finding the URL to log in and remembering your password is higher than the what's in it for me, it won't get used. So the more things you can bake into that application, that increases the what's in it for me, for the rep to go over that barrier to use that tool. Now, messaging alone is a pretty big what's in it for me, but something like ZING has all these other kind of features and functionalities, just adds to that what's in it for me when they access the application. So kind of big critical wins with keeping it all under one roof, and just adds to the success of when you deploy these types of applications across the org.
Yeah, I love that. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Steve.
No, I'm sorry, Kate. If I could just add to that, Darren, you just kind of reminded me of something. The conversation we're having is around life sciences. And I do recall when we would look for applications, it was important. And it took only a few years in life sciences to realize that this is a specialized industry. Yeah, I'm sure every industry will say are specialized, but there, we're a small community, and we're using words like, adverse events or off-label conversations. These are conversations that are specific to life sciences and pharmaceuticals. And if I were in search for a solution, and I've done this in the past looking for other commercial solutions, one of my first questions to the vendor is, what is your experience with life sciences? Do you understand our business? Do you understand the nuances of capturing data and understanding the difference between a regulated healthcare professional or an adverse event or an off-label? You need to understand that. And the beauty of ZING is all of us here, right, that work at P360 have that experience. This isn't just a requirement that you can just pick up off the shelf and deploy.
Well said. Yep. Well said, David.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I love that idea of having all those different features just baked into one, so that you get a much higher rate of adoption. You also get it being used more. It's seamless for end users, and like no matter where you're coming from, it's all in one place. Let me kind of open this up to the floor. This next question here, which is we've touched on a couple features about Zing doing many different things, whether it's approved content or audio video calls, some automation, e-signatures, and so forth. Which of these stand out to you in your experiences, and why? Like, what's the most valuable to you guys?
I'll go first. As a sales rep, I think the ability to capture e-signature is huge. I can't tell you how many times I've needed an HCP has requested samples, but I have to wait to get to them to get that sample request form signed. And it takes time, and then they're not getting the samples fast enough. Whereas if an HCP could text me as a sales rep and say, hey, I need to put in a new sample order. Can you send me a sample request form? I can send them the sample request form via text message or through WhatsApp and capture their signature compliantly. And then it go through and process, and it shipped direct to the HCP, or I can deliver it to the HCP. All of that being taken care of on the back end through messaging is so important, because I don't have to physically be there to do that, right? So I think that e-signature is a huge benefit for a sales rep.
Yeah,
No,
and by all means, David.
Yeah, I have a whole list. I think if I were to prioritize, what I think has the most impact is the approved content. And the reason why is yes, Zing picks up the latest approved content that's easy for me as a rep to use. There's a couple of really neat features. One is it's not just the content, there's context in the content. So what message do you want to send? So I don't have to think about what to say about that content, right? I don't have to word it or, go to ChatGPT and what's the right thing to say. So it's already there. The work has been done by the marketers. The other interesting thing is if I go back to my closed loop marketing days, this has this really unique feature where I know that marketers put a lot of time and effort into creating content. And what happens is that, the marketers are left with is this content being used and how often? So what Zing allows you to do is not only send approved content, but on the back end, you can see by rep or by region or by territory, how often is this content being sent? How often is it being viewed, right? So now you can make really strategic decisions on why isn't this, whether it's a study or something else, why isn't this content being used? Do we need to modify it? Or maybe we take it off and replace it. So I think that's sort of, you think about the next best action. We're not just putting content out there blindly. We're able to see if it's being used.
No, that's a really good point. As a rep, I think content is, like I had mentioned earlier, the ability to send content through this channel would be amazing.
Yeah, and to throw my point or my thoughts into this question, it's a bit like kind of picking which of your kids is the cutest is the trouble I run into with this, because they're all really important, right? Every module, every feature we have put into Zing has thought behind it, right? There's use cases intended for these features and functionalities that we put into them. And so, and messaging is kind of the glue that holds them all together, right? That's the real crux of Zing. I agree with David. The content is huge. Messaging on its own is only so valuable, but as Kim has mentioned several times, having that approved content to be able to include in that fluid conversation is critical. And I will say, if I was forced, my arm was twisted to say which one I think is just the neatest, it is that signature capture, that ability to asynchronously capture a signature and originate it and bring it to its full conclusion right within the Zing application. That's a shining star. I've seen it convert people from being kind of non-believers of using a platform like this to this is what I'm now going to use, right? I've seen that single feature make that large of a pivot in someone's behavior towards the application. And so to me, that is a very powerful tool within ZING.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. It's such a game changer to be able to get that right there and then to have that stored right in there in the same application to be able to have that track record. Another question kind of for the group here is the word frictionless has been thrown around, especially with in relation to ZING. What does that mean to you? And it might mean something a little bit different from each of your perspectives, but what does frictionless mean?
Yeah, I'll take the first part of that. So, you know, I always tell people I've been in technology most of my career, but technology can be a little annoying at times, right? Upload, download, update. And when you're interacting with customers, HCPs, I think the last thing you want to do is say, if you want to communicate with me, download this app, or, you know, upload this, or, you know, let's face it, almost everybody has a cell phone. Everybody has a messaging app, HCPs included, right? And they use it. And a rule should be that if you're going to message customers, make it seamless. You know, don't ask them to download an app. You know, they should use it. Now, the controls are certainly held on the company side, right? But on the receiving side, it should be seamless. I should just be having a regular conversation with my rep. And it's no friction, right? It's not hard. You're not asking me to do anything special that I haven't already done.
Yeah.
Right. I think you made a great point. Asking an HCP to download anything or log into anything, it doesn't happen. I've seen it. So the fact that they don't use an app at all and they just receive on, you know, mostly in the US, the regular text messaging, ex-US, they're using WhatsApp or other channels. Being able to receive that there, where they're already doing most of their conversations without logging in, without having to download something, that's huge, because now you've just made it really easy for them. You've made it so that it causes, there's nothing they have to do to talk to you. Whereas now they have to search their email. They have to, you know, download an app if they want to. They can chat over that. But, you know, this just is so simple for them. And I think when you're trying to engage your customers, the easier you make it, the better you are.
Yeah, I agree. I talked about that what's in it for me barrier, or needing to be over the barrier of entry for a user, for a sales rep. It's even more so for anybody that's a customer, right? The what's in it for me, the barrier of entry has to be almost nothing, right? And that's what David and Kim have both said, right? ZING lives in the applications that person already has on their phone. It's no install, it's no download, it's no user creation, it's no login, it's none of that stuff. In fact, the person that's receiving those messages, those communications from someone using ZING has no idea what ZING is. They don't know that the person sending those messages, sending that content, is even using an application called ZING, because it's just living and breathing in the things they use on a day-to-day basis on their devices as it is. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Another question for all the panelists, but David, actually, maybe you want to kick this one off, is what would you say when you're talking to a company and there's commercial leaders or different teams of different departments who are still relying heavily on email or unofficial messaging? They're sending them ad hoc, and they're trying to reach HCPs and not seeing success. Like, what would you tell those teams?
Well, like I started the conversation, and I think I'm sure Darren and Kim will agree. What I found is marketers, sales operations, salespeople are always finding unique and better ways to reach an HCP. I don't want to say it's a competitive landscape, but the reality is a rep wants to get time. You know, the days of going golfing and expensive restaurants just doesn't happen, and the HCP's time is limited. So I'm always one to certainly venture out and look at new technologies. Make sure that of course it's compliant and it meets your needs without friction, like we talked about earlier. You know, there's a lot of threats out there. You know, I had the opportunity to lead a few large IT departments in general, infrastructure, security, and there's a lot to be worried about. You know, technologists will tell you that. Those threats are real. And, you know, every IT department is probably doing a review to making sure that there's not a rogue application out there that's not secure, you know, and making sure that our healthcare professionals' data is secure and our data is secure.
Yeah.
So, you know, and the good thing is there are technology solutions like this that are focused solely on life sciences to ensure that we're covered.
Yeah, I would, so email is always it's gonna be part of a normal marketing mix, right? An omni-channel mix. Email always still has its place. It's certainly lost some of its luster that it maybe had years ago. But the way the question was worded, right? Those that are still relying heavily on email, or those that are kind of trying to figure out what to do with these messaging platforms, I would even venture to say there's quite a few that are finding themselves where it's not an or, it's an and. They might be heavily relying on email and they're trying to figure out what to do with these new messaging platforms, right? And to those that find themselves in that position, something like ZING, what we've been talking about, is a great option because it's been mentioned, but I'll reiterate briefly here. It's got those things that we figured out with emails over the last however decade or so, right? It's got those compliance controls, the reporting, the restrictions and things that have become accepted, but it lives in that space that's familiar, that's easy to use, that's comfortable, right? That messaging platform world. And it marries those two together. And that's kind of the best of both worlds. And so for those that might find themselves in that place where it's not an or, it's an and, something like ZING is what they've got to start looking towards.
Yeah. And I want to touch on something that David had mentioned, right? The HCPs really don't have time. As a ZING brand lead, I'm always kind of asking questions when I'm out in my day-to-day life of different people. So, you know, I asked recently my personal doctor, you know, what would you think of something like this? He's like, actually, the insurance companies are limiting how long I'm allowed to spend with each patient in order to stay within that insurance company. And so if I had the ability to reach out, get the question answered, and still stay within my allotted time, that would be very helpful for me. I'm pressed from all different angles, so I've got to give reps time. I've got to give my nurses time. I've got to give patients time. And insurance says I can't give anybody time. So I don't know what to do with my day. He's like, something like this would be super helpful in my day-to-day personally, because I'm a busy primary care office, to be able to get questions answered on the fly, on the need, you know, with the right accuracy.
Yeah, I think that's such a big point. It's just being able to have everything on demand in a frictionless, seamless way that we keep coming back to. Thank you for those insights from all three of you. I want to just encourage anybody who's listening in on the webinar live that you can put in the comment section any questions that you have for the panelists as we've come to the end of our scheduled questions, but we do have a couple questions that were submitted earlier. So if you guys don't mind, we'll field a couple of those. The first one that we got ahead of time was, how can messaging improve follow-ups after sales calls or meetings?
I'll go ahead and take that one. Sure. I feel the messaging is really helpful with that follow-up perspective, because I can go spend 10 minutes with the doctor, which I know is a lot, but I can have a quick conversation, talk them through a detail, and then the next day say, hey doc, it was great to see you yesterday. By the way, here's a copy of that detail that we went over. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach back out to me. And then I'm just keeping that going. That conversation continues. I'm giving them an avenue, a time to read it over when they have time, right? When I'm seeing them in the office, they might give me 5 minutes, but they might listen for 30 seconds of that 5 minutes. So I'm following up, reinforcing the message I was trying to deliver, but giving them that time in a conversational manner to come back to me if they have any questions or concerns or want me to stop back by.
Right.
Yeah, I would add to that too, the follow-up on the other side, right? So we just pointed out how busy these HCPs are. And if an HCP has a question about a conversation, just bust open your text and ask, right?
Right.
You don't have to ask administrators to get so-and-so on the phone. I have a follow-up question. They can just right there text, and it's tracked, it's fully compliant, and no worries about that.
Yeah, and again, from a sales operations perspective, that job of enabling all of those sales folks with these tools to do their job, you're looking to extend the value of that in-person call, right? The rarity, the shortness of them, things like everything Kim had said is absolutely real in today's market. And so anything you can do to extend the value of that interaction past those few moments you had is very valuable.
Yeah, agreed. Another question that just came in, which is, how does two-way messaging fit into the larger CRM and sales ops strategy?
So I think I'll take that, but I think it has to be able to integrate with your CRM. It has to fit in architecturally, meaning contacts, territories, right? Most, if not all, companies have a CRM like a Salesforce or a Veeva. They've spent the time defining the territories, the products. With ZING, it takes all of that into account. There is no entering a content on my own or telling this product, oh, by the way, I sell these solutions, or I'm managing this territory. Oh, now we've realigned, I'm managing that territory. Whatever platform you use, if I was to put ZING aside, you have to make sure it's fully integrated with the existing system, with your content management solution, and that it's not sort of hard-coded, that there's the ability to add or take away from that integration, and to add rules and include it in workflows and things like that. So I think integration is very part of it, but treat it as yet another channel within your architecture. The worst thing you can do is have a standalone system that isn't talking to the other core solutions.
Yeah, that's a great point. So another question that came in, which is, what are the key risks of allowing reps to manage HCPs from personal phones? So that's a good one.
It is.
Want to take that?
I think when you're using ZING, a lot of those risks are eliminated because ZING can provide you guardrails in terms of prevented words. ZING has the ability to block certain words from being sent. And then they have the ability to highlight words coming in so that you know where you need to focus attention to if somebody says something, as well as each piece of branded content that is MLR approved is MLR approved with the message that goes with it. So you don't, to David's point earlier, you're not thinking about, okay, how do I describe this piece of collateral that I'm sending to my HCP? It's already done. It's already been approved. What you're allowed to say, what you can say about it is already written. You just select it, and that message goes with a text message and the actual article or piece of collateral.
Yeah, sounds pretty seamless to me. So yeah, sorry, David, did you want to comment on that?
No, absolutely. Using personal devices. So there's a whole host of concerns. Let's not forget about the HIPAA and GDPR regulations around protecting, personal information. Auditability is super important, right? So, a rep leaves, good luck trying to get those text conversations from, the likes of Apple or one of the other providers. They won't do it. I understand why. So auditability is important in case you need it, in case there's some litigation. So, using a personal device, for me, as long as there's, mobile device management integrated, and associated with ZING, it should be fine. But having a personal device on its own, just texting HCPs, I think is very risky.
Yeah, and good addition, David. I was going to talk about the data capture on the backside too, right? It's absolutely, the risks are what's said, right? being said verbally is one thing, but when it's written down, it carries an entirely different sense of weight, right? And all of these messages are very much written down, very much trackable, right? And actually, it should even say that those that don't keep those records retained for very long, DOJ has very strong guidance on, I don't care, you need to keep those, right? They've made that very clear over the last several months. So that back-end data capture is as important. It's important to stop things from being sent that shouldn't be sent. It's important to restrict things that are compliant to only be sent, but it's also super important to make sure that that data on the other side can be viewed, analyzed, picked apart for any egregious errors or offenses, and used for training, used for litigation, whatever in the world it might be. But these are all very critical parts to that that risk assessment that should go along with using a tool like this or a platform like this.
Yeah, good points there, definitely. One other question that came in, which is, can messaging help reps build more trust and personal rapport with HCPs?
I'll go ahead and start with that one. As a rep, I think I would gain a lot more trust from my HCPs and a much stronger rapport, because I can be much more responsive. I can respond much faster. If a HCP wants to ask me a question today, they might still text it to me or they might email it to me, and I have to wait until I can access my rep triggered emails and be able to send it to them. So I think being able to respond quickly is super important for that.
And if I can, you mind if and if I could just add to that too, the trust and relationship between representative and their contacts, whether it's the physician or staff in the office, whatever it might be, there still needs to be a personal aspect to that, right? But when you have that in-person piece, it gets it adds having the ability to message and continue that conversation past those moments where you can see them face to face. It compounds how important that is. The relationship's almost kind of established in those few moments you have in front of them, and then it builds with these types of platforms that carry on after that moment. It's been a while since I've been a rep, but I remember that being very critical to, like I said, extend the value of that visit.
Excuse me.
Yeah, I would also add to that, and looking at the other side of the equation, I think it helps the rapport with the HCP to the company. So continuity is very important. I do remember working in pharma, territory alignments were a big deal, right? It's not uncommon that a sales rep would move from one territory to another or sell another product. And the beauty about the technology we're talking about here is, if I'm an HCP and I have a phone number or a messaging number to my rep, regardless of the fact if that rep moves on, that number is still valid. That number is that company's number to that territory for that product, right? So now we've got continuity and trust. I don't have to figure out what number is it now, who am I talking to now. So I just think it makes more business sense to have that kind of continuity in that relationship.
Excellent. Yeah, very good point. I just want to wrap up this great conversation with one other question that was passed on before we started, which was, how can leaders ensure messaging platforms don't become another fragmented channel? So what would your advice be of how they roll it out and how they deal with it?
I have an opinion on this, and a sort of strong one. So email, like I mentioned, email was kind of the thing a decade or so ago, whatever that might have been. And email has kind of become, it's I don't want to say irrelevant. It's lost its luster, I think is what I said earlier. And that's happened because it's turned into a purely marketing channel, just as much as it used to be just a communication channel, right? We all get marketing email. There's literally a separate tab in Gmail that says, here's all your marketing emails now, right? That's how prevalent it's just become as part of that channel. Mm-hmm. to me, messaging, this one-on-one messaging, the real value comes from what KG had said, having that relationship and using this tool to further that relationship, to support that relationship when needs arise, and not turning it into a, here's our weekly blast of content, right? It's super important because the relationships are what enable you to get that number from that person. They're entrusting you with that number to use that in an appropriate way, and making sure that it's used in an appropriate way to build that relationship, but also support them through content, share relevant information with them, and whatever else you're using Zing for, whether it's signatures, whether it's webinars, whatever in the world it is. It's important to keep that as that kind of, we are supporting you as a one-on-one relationship versus truly looking at it as this is a brand amplification channel.
I mean, I couldn't agree with what Darran said more. I think he was spot on there, right? Yeah. It's building that relationship. You don't want to spam them. You want to keep that very conversational. So yeah.
I think the other way to make sure it's not fragmented too, and is quite often companies will deploy software and assume that if it's built, they will come, right? Here's a tool, go use it. And that's further from the truth. You could have the best technology in the world. And we all know, all right, like sales representatives are creatures of habit. Whatever works, if it's generating sales, they're going to keep doing it, right? Adoption is a very key role in any technology deployment. And it starts from the leaders. I think the question asked about leadership, right? And it's really about setting those standards and goals and helping reps adopt to new technology. And it can't just be pushed. We talked a lot today about two components. One is the compliance aspects and the value you get from compliance, but what's the rep getting out of it, right? Look at all the great things that are going to make reps more productive, more in tune with their HCPs. So there's value on both ends, but to just put a technology out there and expect it to work is how technology becomes fragmented.
Right. No, that makes sense. Well, thank you all for those insights. I really appreciated this conversation today. Did anyone want to kind of touch on some key takeaways to make sure that we are highlighting those?
Sure. So I was taking some notes. So some key takeaways from today that I got. Messaging with Zing ensures seamless on-demand communication. Compliance is key. And having a tool like Zing in place to monitor and store interactions is vital in a highly regulated industry like life sciences. And we've talked a lot about how that's really important following those regulations. Zing enables a one-stop for all communication and all those needs that you have within the communication, such as e-signature, approved content, QR codes, video calling, even voice calling, right? So that can be important as well. So Zing offers that one-stop shop for all of that.
Yep, agreed. All right. Well, I really appreciate you guys taking the time for this conversation today, which I think was really important. Anyone who's visiting or watching this today, you can always find out more information at p360.com. You'll be able to find all more information about Zing, and of course, reach out to us. We will be following up with this both on social as well as email, and then of course posting this webinar after the fact. But I really appreciate your time today, and thank you for this interesting conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.